Welcome to another episode of Putting It All Together. Today we're going to mainly be dealing with three things on this website of the Arnold's Historic Lighting. One is we're going to talk about links, and that won't take very long. We'll do a little bit on links. We'll get that done first. Then after that, we're going to talk about pseudo classes and pseudo elements, which I think you'll find very useful in your websites. So let's get started. For this, I've only opened 3 pages in BBEdit. I've opened the styles page, the restoration page, and the HTML page. I don't think we're going to really need the code for any of the other pages today in this video, but we'll see. If we need one, we'll open one. We are going to do a little bit of modification today to the page to make it a little bit better, and then some things we're just going to look at. So for starters, let's go to the restoration page, because the restoration page has the hyperlink in it. I don't have a lot of hyperlinks on this website. I mainly have it here and then the buttons. So when you talk about a relative versus an absolute link, remember you're talking about, for the relative, can I get to it from the current folder that I'm in? For the absolute, it's the entire path. So if you look at the restoration page's HTML, you'll see that for the navigation, there's no path other than just the file name itself. And the reason being that I'm in the same folder here. It would still be relative if I had to go to another folder, etc. My image sources, those are relative paths as well, because they just go into the images folder from this current folder that we're in. However, if we go to our link to eBay, this is an absolute link. Notice it has the whole start with the HTTP, in this case HTTPS, and the whole domain name and all this stuff. So what I want to first of all mention to you is I didn't just send them to eBay for this absolute link. What did I do? Take a look again if you don't remember. I click on this. It leaves my page open right here, but it opens a new page with what? Already searched for a gas chandelier, already there. So how did I get a link to do that? Well, it's because there's all this extra garbage at the end of it, all this extra stuff. All I did was, it's very simple, I just went up here and copied this link. And then I came over and pasted it here in my href section of my tag. It's a pretty long link, but it does get you that search page already coming up. If you wanted to link to a YouTube channel, you would do the same thing. You wouldn't just link to YouTube. You'd get a URL for the entire page or the entire path to that YouTube channel, and you'd paste that in. The only other thing we really need to talk about with these links is we need to talk about the target attribute. So the target is where you want this new page to go. Traditionally, there are 4 different target settings you can do. There's underscore self, there is underscore blank, there's underscore parent, and there's underscore top. You also can do a custom one. The problem with the custom top and parent is they all deal with what we call frame sets. And frame sets are really on their way out. So that's not something that we use much anymore. Now, why are frame sets on their way out? What is a frame set? Well, it's a group of pages all in the same window. So as an example, in the old days, if I look here at my page, I would have had this top section with the menu bar be a frame. And then I would have had this part below be another frame. If I go back to my home page, I might have had this top part be a frame, this picture be a frame, and this text be a frame. Why would I divide it up like that? Well, before, in the old days, as I said, we had bandwidth issues. We needed to be able to save as much time loading a site as possible. So think about it. If I clicked on one of these pages in the old days, wouldn't it be nice if we didn't have to reload the top portion of the page? It just stayed there. We just did this bottom portion. Especially if these buttons, like they used to be, would have been images instead of done with CSS. Again, another reason for less loading, because images take longer to load. So that was the idea of frame sets. They also wreak havoc for screen readers to pass the Americans with Disabilities Act. And so that's another kind of nail in the coffin for frame sets. So for that reason, those targets are still available, but they're not really used. The two that are used are blank and self. But the thing is, even for self, you don't have to use it at all because it defaults. So if I change this to self and save that, I'll refresh this page. See, it just changed my current tab to be that, and I have to use the back button to get back. If I took out this, I'm not going to spend the time doing it, but if I just took out this target equals self, it would do that exact same thing. But what I'm doing is blank so that I get the new tab when I click on it. And every time I click on it, I get a new tab. So let me mention real quick before we move on to our pseudo classes and pseudo elements section. Let me just mention that the parent and top. So, well, I don't want to get too far into it because I don't have a frame set up here to explain to you, and it's not really that relevant anymore anyway. But the parent is the level right above where you currently are. So that would open it in that top of that, or that section, the beginning of that frame set. But you could have a frame set within a frame set. And so top would replace the entire thing. It would go all the way up to the top and replace the entire frame set with the new page you're opening. So I just wanted to throw that out there. But again, it's not really relevant anymore. Okay, with that said, let's move on to pseudo classes and pseudo elements. So I am going to go back to the home page because that's where I'm going to mess with most of the stuff. Now it's going to apply, I'm going to apply it in the external CSS style sheet. So this is going to happen throughout the site, but I'm going to mainly work with paragraphs. And this is the page I have the most paragraphs on. And so I'm going to go ahead and be on this page for the most part. So I'm going to come over here and I'm going to go to my styles page. And I'm going to come up here close to the top. I'll go under this paragraph tag with the figure tag, that rule. And I'm going to put a comment here, a couple of pseudo classes. And then I'm going to skip a few lines. I'm going to put here some pseudo elements. So what's the difference between a pseudo class and a pseudo element? So a pseudo class is something that can be, well, if you think of pseudo, the word pseudo to start with, if you're pseudocode, it means fake code. So these are like a little bit semi-pretend, but they're real. I mean, it's kind of a funny way to think about it. But pseudo classes basically take an existing tag and apply something when something happens to the tag, okay, or a particular instance of a tag, in a sense, like you can do the last type of, but or last of type, but we'll deal with that in a minute. But the pseudo class deals with an existing element. The pseudo element does not. There's no tag to speak of. We're usually dealing with a part of something in a tag. So, for example, the first letter pseudo element. If we use first letter, that would apply to, say, a paragraph, but it is not the whole paragraph tag. It's only that first letter. So it's dealing with part of it. So the element is part, the class is kind of the whole thing. So let's go ahead and write a couple classes. And I'm going to show you after I write them that I already have a couple of them here. But I want you to see me write some from scratch first, and then we'll look at the ones that are already here. As a disclaimer, I currently do not have any pseudo elements. So all the pseudo elements I'm going to be writing are new in this document. I don't have any others to say, hey, I already have this one here. I didn't have any pseudo elements to start with. So let's go ahead and write our first pseudo class. And I'm going to apply this to a paragraph. So for a pseudo class, you put P : and then what about it? What do you want to deal with? And there's a whole big long list. There's probably at least 20 of them. But I'm going to just share a few of them with you today. One is hover. So I'm going to put hover, P : hover, and then just as a normal CSS rule with the brackets, I do that. And then I'm going to do something. I'm going to put color : red, semicolon. Now I'm going to save this, and I'm going to come over to my page. I'm going to refresh my page. It didn't refresh. And now when I move my mouse over, you see the paragraphs turn red. This might be a real beneficial thing for your site to have. But for my site, it might be beneficial, but red is the wrong color. The problem with what I want to do is I want to make the dark blue, but I was afraid it might not show up on your screen, or you might not be able to see the difference between black and dark blue through a recording. You can see it on the actual web browser when you're using the site in person. So I did it red first, just so you see it works. I'm going to go change it now to dark blue because that's what I want for this. So I'm going to save it. I'm going to come over here. I've got to refresh. See, now it's dark blue. It may be a little harder for you to see, but it is dark blue. So that's our first pseudo class. It's talking about hovering over any paragraph. Now, I have a paragraph on the restoration page. See, and it does that same thing right there. I don't think I have any more paragraphs in my document or my site. It's just the home page and this one right here. The home page, this is a paragraph 2 down here. So 5 paragraphs total, not that many. All right, so now let's do another one. This one's interesting. Well, that other one was interesting too, but this one's even more interesting. I'm going to do a paragraph again, P : and I'm going to put last of type with dashes in between the words. Last of type. Now, what happens with last type? It means the last paragraph in a section. So the last paragraph in a section, I'm going to make its background light blue. Just like that. So I'm going to save this. I'm going to come over here. I'm going to refresh again and look at that. I have 2 in blue because this is a section and this is a section. Notice my rollover still works. It still turns it the dark blue, the text, because I only modified the background. I didn't modify the text itself. If I go over to my restoration page, the first paragraph is also the last paragraph. So it also has that highlight in it. Okay, so now I want to talk about what elements already had pseudo classes. where were the pseudo classes I already had? I had a couple, well, about 3 of them, I think. Let's go through and look at them. So one of them is in my navigation bar, which we'll talk about the navigation bar later in a future video, but I just want you to see it right here. It's the hover one, a hover. So it has to be in our navigation class, it has to be a list item, and we have to be hovering over it, an A tag with a hovering over, to have this happen. So there is a pseudo class that was already in our page. The other one is my table values. And when we get to tables, I want to show you how I can change the colors of even versus odd cells. And so we're not going to spend time on this today, but I do want you to see the pseudo class. There's one called first child and nth child. Okay, and we can do an even or an odd, or we can put a formula in. We will cover this when we get to the table section. But for now, I just wanted you to see that, oh, there's another, well, some more pseudo classes down here. So that's pseudo classes. Several examples for you. Now we're going to talk about some pseudo elements. Remember, this takes a section or part of. So pseudo elements, the ones that we tend to look at are after, before, first letter, first line, or selection. And for before and after, it just adds something. Like if you put a paragraph with a before, you could, maybe you want to put a little star before or a star after. You could use the pseudo element for before or after to do that. But we're not going to do the before or after. We're going to work with some of the others. We're going to do actually all the others. We're going to do first letter, first line, and selection. First letter is one that you will probably need to use. So let's go ahead and do it. For pseudo elements, we use 2 colons. So a paragraph, colon, colon. And so this first letter is just part of a paragraph. It's that beginning first letter. So let's go ahead and type first dash letter, and then our parenthesis sets. Now, what do we want to do? Well, I'm going to make the font size bigger. So I'm going to put font dash size, colon, and you could do any type of measurements you want. I'm going to use pixels because I have pixels on this page already, 24px. And so there's my font size, and I'm going to make the color be the dark blue. Now, before, I already made the paragraph to where you hover, it gets dark blue. But this means that before you ever hover, that first letter is going to be dark blue. So let's go ahead and save this and go look at our first pseudo element in action. There it is. And see how it changes. It's still, the color matches after that. So there we have our first pseudo element. This first letter pseudo element is great for newspapers, journals, anything like that, where you could have an article written where they like to have that first letter uppercase in a paragraph. So this is a really valuable one for those people who are making things like that. Let's do the first line now. So for first line, I'm going to put P colon colon. And this time, first line, oops, first dash line, sorry, mistyped. And then I'm going to go down here like that. And this time, what I want to do is I want to make that first line kind of stand out. To me, that larger letter, it's a little bit overkill. But if I were to make the first line bold, I think it would look better. So I'm going to do that. So in here, I'm going to put font dash weight colon bold. Save it. I'm going to come over here and refresh it. And now look at that. I've got bold. and it still changes to the blue. We go and look at our restoration page. It's all bold because there's only one line in that paragraph. Our gallery page should not have changed. There shouldn't be any differences to it. The contact page should not have changed. There's no differences to it either. Just the restoration and the home. So now I'm going to do the element that I think is the coolest of all, and that's the selection. That one, it's because look, if I just drag over something right now, that's what it looks like. I mean, it's okay, but to me, it looks crummy. Let's make it look amazing. So let's go over here and let's add another pseudo element. And this one, I'm going to put P : selection. My parentheses again, I always like to do that first. And now what I'm going to do is I'm going to set the background color, so dash color, to black. You may say, Mr. Arnold, you won't be able to see the text very well. Even if you can get it to turn blue, it's not going to be very nice. But I'm going to overwrite that. Remember, the most recent rule overwrites the others. So I'm going to change the color of the text to white. So what's that going to do? That's going to make this look amazing. So I'm going to refresh. Now look, doesn't that look better? It can be part of a paragraph, all of a paragraph. Remember, it's a pseudo element, not a pseudo class. Now my first letter, see the first letter didn't change? The first letter did overrule. So if I had not set a color on the first letter, we can go back and check that. Let's see, let's go back and look here. So first letter, if I take out the dark blue, let's do that, save it. Now it's black. Oh, it still doesn't. It's not going to catch the first letter. That's too bad. So it didn't catch the first letter, but let's go ahead and put this back because I like that there. I like the blue there. I mean, I might not actually do this in real life to make this page look just like this, but I wanted you to really see what you can do with these different elements, the pseudo elements and the pseudo classes. So I hope this gives you some idea. Could you do something with them for your captions down here in the pictures? Sure. Could you do something to the images? Maybe give them a border? Yeah. Do all sorts of things with the pseudo classes and pseudo elements. The pseudo well, let's see here. Mainly for those, for images, you're going to be dealing with pseudo classes, not really pseudo elements, but because the pseudo elements won't really apply much with before, after, first letter, first line, or selection on a picture. But the pseudo classes, you can have a hover over the picture. You could make it larger. You could put a border around. You could do all sorts of stuff to it. So that's kind of an idea of something you could do there with this type of setup. So I hope this helps. Oh, one other thing too I'll mention. You also could style a form with, like, if you had required fields, and you could make them like a different color, or you could put a star after them, etc. I didn't do that because I don't list mine as required, because I'm dealing with JavaScript for this part. And remember, when you click the submit, it does all this, which I have coded basically hard-coded in there myself to give you a really neat example of JavaScript at the end, in one of the last videos that you will be seeing in this series. So I didn't do that here, but you could format a form using these pseudo elements or pseudo classes. Again, in particular, the pseudo classes. All right, well, I will see you in the next video.